Alright, continuing on, we're on point 5 now. Reasons for accepting the KJV as God's preserved word. The KJV translators were honest in their work. When the translators had to add certain words, largely due to idiom changes, they placed the added words in italics so we know the difference, unlike many new perversions. Okay, again, trying to weed through the attacks that are made, in there, but just getting to the point itself and the evidence. It says when the translators had to add certain words, largely due to idiom changes, they placed the added words in italics. If you remember back at the videos before these, dealing with the introductory material to the 1611, I spoke about that the original 1611, they used margin notes, showing possible alternate renderings of Greek words and phrases. Also, they would point out if a certain verse was missing in Greek and other Greek copies and so forth. They pointed those things out. We don't have that in the King James versions that you buy today, so people are pretty ignorant of that situation. So they think that that that's something that's only done in the modern translations, which is not true. The other thing here is talking about largely due to idiom changes. It wasn't largely due to idiom changes, because you got to remember that it's a proven fact that no two Greek manuscripts agree identically 100% of their existence. I mean, unless you maybe a couple of small fragments that are showing the same passages or whatever, they may, just because they're so small. But if you have any that are substantial enough to look at, like maybe if you're looking at the manuscripts that contained, Paul's epistles, none of them are going to read exactly the same. They were slight differences here and there, but it was because of scribal errors, Anyway, so again, most of this reasoning and the reasoning of the King James only advocates is that they're working off of a preconceived idea that God had one set of manuscripts that were perfect, and he kept those perfect through the years, and it came down to the King James, or came down to Erasmus and then to the King James. But that's not true. There were variations in them, and then when Erasmus, he collated, he took his 6 to 12 manuscripts, and he had to pull them together to create his own. And as he became exposed to different manuscripts between his first edition and his third edition, he would have to revise his own editions because he would find new material or whatever. So again, the whole argument, like I said, is based off of this idea that there was just one pure text, and Erasmus had it, and then the King James versions had that one. But if you remember, going back to that video about the introduction to the King James version and the letter to the reader, they pointed out that they themselves didn't just use the Textus Receptus. They also they utilized other translations in other languages. They utilized the Latin. They even utilized the Catholic translation. I mean, they utilized anything they could get their hands on, basically. Now, I can hear the arguments coming back now. But, look at all that they did look at, is what I'm saying. They didn't look at just one thing. It wasn't just the Textus Receptus. That wasn't the only Greek source that they used. It was the main one, but it wasn't the only one. So, anyway, point 6. All new translations compare themselves to the KJV. Isn't it strange that the new perversions never compare themselves to one another? For some strange reason, Matthew 12:26, they all line up against one book, the AV 1611. Okay, well, I think what the writer here is talking about when he's saying that they compare themselves to the KJV is in the introduction to any of the new translations, when they start talking about how they translated it and all this kind of stuff. Most of the good ones, because not all. You got a lot of paraphrases. You got some new loose translations out there that I don't give much credence to. But the good solid ones, will say that the 1611 KJV kind of set the pace, set the tone, set the model for good, proper translating. And they're just saying that, they too follow, in other words, it wasn't just done by one person. There was, a team of people done, and they would check each other. The same setup that the King James used in 1611. Anyway, and it's talking about that they don't compare themselves to one another. Some of them kind of do reference back to the Revised Standard of 1881, which was, the first modern translation since the 1611. So some of them kind of refer back to that and saying, that they're in that line. The thing is how you view it. If you come into it thinking that, you got the King James as the standard or the only one, and everybody else is, it's the king of the hill, and everybody else is just trying to fight for position. But the mindset that they use is the same one that the translators of the 1611 kind of give out, and that is that it is a line of revisions, starting from Wycliffe, and going forward. Tyndale, Coverdale, Bishop's Great Bible, King James, Revised Standard. They just see it as a line of revisions, and also, a fresh translation to the original languages. And then some of them, utilize, they have different idea how they want to translate, whether they want to translate what's called a dynamic equivalence, which is kind of a thought for thought translation, or if they want to go for more of a word for word. There's different structures in that, which will create some differences. So anyway, again, I think that that's just kind of a colorful argument to lift up the King James and put the rest of them down. But I don't see any evidence to support their claim. So we'll move on.